What's up? Welcome back to my channel, or for the first time if you're new, I'm Sylvan, and today I'm going to be reacting to a Honkai Star Rail animated short, the HERTA'S Magic Kitchen. Interesting how it's all weirdly spaced and all capitalized and stuff, but I was in no way expecting this, but the title itself is intriguing to me. I'm curious to see what it'll entail, so I won't belabor things any further. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, leave a comment on your thoughts, and let's get into the video. Okay, a Herta puppet. Multiple Herta puppets. Okay. Little Herta, like, fairy type things?
Seems like it's not going well. All the more reason to prepare a big present.
Oh my god, she has a giant picture of herself.
Remember to bring that new magic tome with you.
Huh. So she also uses the puppets as, like, servants of hers. Does she just live in an entire, like, castle? It's interesting what not having the hat does to her appearance. All the little baby little Hertas.
Let me see.
Ooh.
This is the magic that makes cakes delicious?
Making a cake? Okay.
Easy peasy. All right.
Oh,
Over
God.
to you. I need a call.
Nice little cameo of the curio.
Is a piece of cake for a genius.
Uh-oh. This is fine.
Everything under control.
Okay, yeah, it's just using all the little curios and stuff. She cannot stop causing explosions, it would seem.
What?
What the? The fucking riot shields. What is happening?
All done.
Let me guess. Oh my god.
I still remember that line of yours. For a genius, nothing is more precious than failure. The smell of burnt food. How strange.
You're awfully close
I
there,
prepared a
Ron.
cake and rushed over to congratulate you as quick as I could. Still, I've got something bigger coming.
Uh-huh.
Let me borrow your lab. Look.
Oh my god. What?
How flamboyant. I prefer the smaller one.
That's odd. Since when did you develop good taste?
Huh. That's cute. I love that. This is a really just sort of fun, lighthearted look at, I guess, what an average day for Herta is like. One thing I like that this shows us is how she doesn't just use her puppets for interacting with other people. She also uses them as essentially a workforce. They can and are, to a certain degree, autonomous and capable of following instruction. But what I find particularly interesting about the puppets is that she has these tiny little ones that are like, can fly around, and are much more these like small-scale drone type things almost, but they're still fashioned after her aesthetically. But they bring her her phone. She looks at various notifications she has. We can't read them, unfortunately. But there's one of the little pet things that Braun May has made. She lets the little, like, fairy drone versions of herself take her phone back. The fact that she herself is her own phone case certainly is saying something. I would assume this will be her phone case when she comes out. But she says something about seeming like it's not going well. Presumably with Ron May and her experiments with the little creatures, based on the context of the image. But who's to really say? But continuing in showing us the vanity of Herta, we see that in her own bedroom is a massive portrait of herself. She says all the more reason to prepare a big present. I imagine what she's referencing there is the massive cake that she creates around Ron May's lab and station and whatever it is. But she says, let's go. Several of her puppets follow behind her, practically being attendants of hers. She tells one to bring the new magic tome with her. As one prepares clothes, one brushes her hair. They really are just servants and attendants for her. She has surrounded herself with puppet versions of herself that will do everything she says. But then she comes up to her essentially magic staff. Something that is very interesting about her is, though she is technically a scientist and a genius, she aesthetically is far more of a witch and mage type. Between the staff, the outfit, and her general domain, as we see here in a minute. She uses her staff to, rather than walk down the stairs, for all intents and purposes, magically levitate a carpet or rug or whatever down the stairs that have overgrown plant life coming down across them. All of this is very magic coded visually. The entire space and vibe is that of a witch's castle type place. A fantastical place with inexplicable magic. But as we know, this is all just science, technically. There is the concept, which I believe Herta has made reference to in the past, of the relationship between magic and science. That aspects of reality that are not yet understood can be seen as magic, and at certain degrees of scientific prowess, the things that geniuses do can be perceived as magic. Ultimately, her entire aesthetic is just leaning into that, and it's shown fully here in this animation. Another detail before continuing also is, I didn't even notice it at first when first reacting, but here, as far as I can tell, is our first simulated universe cameo type thing, as we see the portraits for various occurrences. And of course, as I called out in the reaction, there are more things like this to come. Very much they're tying in the aesthetic and visual elements of the simulated universe into her visual identity and aesthetic. But then she rides the carpet down the stairs, bursting through the floor into another space, going through a space that seems like she's upside down. We pass by her, she looks at the camera as she moves by. She's going down this ramp. They stop, she walks off. Some puppets open some doors, and she's in a kitchen lab area. And then for a brief bit, we follow just the various little... I like the idea of calling them fairies more than anything. Though they are clearly puppets, they have the aesthetic of little wind-up dolls. They float around with twinkling dust behind them, very much like a classic fairy aesthetically would. Sort of in line with that, we see that they're being used to gather and maintain plants, harvesting seeds and grains, and putting them on conveyor belts to be used. And it's all just really cute. The little carts and stuff for eggs and milk are nice. I didn't actually notice this in the initial reaction, but a couple of the fairies actually bring her her hat. Truly everything is done for her as she goes through the space. And then, interestingly enough, another puppet comes, but this one much smaller, more childlike. We're used to the one who is clearly more of a child compared to her aesthetically and visually, but where if these other ones are like preteen, maybe range, something like that, this is like a 5 or 6 year old. So she truly has made a spectrum of her childhood and lifetime to a degree with these puppets. But this puppet brings her the book, presumably the magic tome she was talking about before, which is in reality just essentially a cookbook for a cake, it seems. As she says, once again blurring that line between science and magic, this is the magic that makes cakes delicious? Easy peasy. As with a flourish, she goes to mix the ingredients together, thinking it'll be no big deal. This is really the first thing she's herself tried to do. And even then, she's still getting help. But then immediately, with a little transition with one of the little fairy puppets going by the screen, we can see that she's already beginning to overexert herself. She starts stretching, but then has an idea. She pulls out a little contraption, which we can recognize as one of the curios from the simulated universe, that she uses to be, from the looks of it, a makeshift mixer, basically. As once she has established that, she goes, all right, that's enough work for me, over to you, puppet, I need a coffee. Only for then, as she says, cooking is a piece of cake, we see that that may not necessarily be the case, and she has overtuned this a bit. As the little device begins to glow yellow and then red, the puppet taking note, as she picks up her coffee, takes a sip, an explosion goes off. And it's hard to make out her exact expression, but she seems maybe slightly surprised. But what this is the first in a line of various explosions that she faces away from as she goes about her day. Each of these segments here is essentially the same setup and payoff of her trying to prepare an aspect of a cake, in some way overdoing things, using certain technology or devices in an attempt to make things go easier or smoother or improve things, only for it to not blow up in her face, but blow up gloriously nonetheless. Not that it perturbs her. As she says, everything under control. Next up, they put some things into an oven. Something notable about this moment is we see all of the little fairy puppet versions of herself carry these into the oven, but notably we can see for a moment that at least one of them didn't make it out of the oven. And then here, following up that, we see all of the little puppet dolls lining up with a notable gap here. She walks by, stops, notices one is missing, as suddenly some of the more larger scale puppets rush by in like full riot gear this time. Explosion goes off, puppets flying in the background from the explosion, but she's just returned to her cup of tea. She tries to multitask. She seems to have done something successfully for a moment, but all of the HERTA'S are coming in defensively just in case. They've learned what to do in this circumstance, and believe it or not, it explodes. We see her using more curios to attempt to do things, all of them blowing up, once again not in her face, but in the face of all of her little puppets. We can see that this is taking a toll on some of the little dolls, as they are covered in ash and soot and ingredients, and are beginning to malfunction, as just explosions are going on around them. But by the end of it, we have the oven untouched, sparkling. She opens it, smoke rising out of it. She takes a picture of a little cake that seems like it's meant to be that of a face, but it has smoke just rising out of the eyes and mouth. And as they swipe through some of the pictures she took of the final results, seeing how just horrible they turned out, we have Ron May speaking, saying, "I still remember that line of yours. For a genius, nothing is more precious than failure." It feels like she's, in a way, almost trying to comfort her despite her failure at this. The smell of burnt food. How strange. But doesn't seem to perturb Herta much, as she just says, "I prepared a cake and rushed over to congratulate you as quick as I could. Still, I've got something bigger coming." As she strikes her staff, says, "Let me borrow your lab," and we pan out to outside the lab, where the entirety of the outside has been transformed into a cake. Vibrant stars and planets and shooting stars surrounding it. Clearly a just manifests environment. And Ron May, clearly unimpressed, just says, "How flamboyant. I prefer the smaller one." And Herta just jabs back, "That's odd. Since when did you develop good taste?" Clearly they have this sort of playful bickering to their relationship, which we've seen before, but we see more of it here. And as the two of them walk off, presumably to do some other experiment or something, that is where they leave us. It's real fun, real cute, not a ton of like lore or stakes to this really, but that really isn't important. This is clearly just meant to be goofy and fun and a look at what Herta herself is like in her day-to-day life. And I'm a big fan of that. I really enjoy when HoYoverse just gives us these random little animated shorts and teasers and trailers that normally we don't expect and don't necessarily matter to some grander scale thing, but just help to inform character more. It's just really cool to have and shows that they are passionate about the characters, and I'm a big fan of it. But with that, I don't think there's really too much else to discuss here. There's inevitably probably some Easter eggs I missed here. I saw a lot of the curios and things from the simulated universe, but there's probably a few I missed. For now, I think I will leave things here. But something I would draw attention to before I go is that I made a community post the other day talking about how I want to get back to making some actual gameplay story content on the main story of all the HoYoverse games, like I did previously for 2.2 and 2.3 of Star Rail and Zenless Zone Zero. And I have a poll attached to it. I imagine that not everyone necessarily saw it, so if you're interested in having any amount of input on how I go about doing future content, that is a good place to do it for the near future. But beyond that, don't really have too much more to say, so feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, leave a comment on your thoughts, and I hope you all had a great day. Goodbye!